The gleaming obsidian chamber of the Vazrathi Grand Council stretched vast and imposing, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadow above the circular platform where Commander Krosoth stood at rigid attention. His exoskeleton armor, polished to a mirror shine, reflected the bioluminescent glow from the council members seated in their elevated positions. The air hummed with tension and the subtle vibrations of a dozen different communication frequencies. High Counselor Morvala's voice cut through the silence, her fanged mandibles clicking with barely restrained fury. 3 stealth cruisers, 3 of our most advanced vessels. Disabled by what, Commander? Krosoth suppressed the urge to shift his weight. He had served the Vazrathi Empire for 273 cycles. He had led the conquest of the Arcturus system. He had faced the void beasts of Tau Ceti. But nothing in his considerable experience had prepared him for the humiliation of delivering this particular report. A liquid spill. High Counselor. The chamber erupted in sounds of disbelief. Counselor Duvok's translucent dorsal spines flared crimson with outrage. Counselor Vex hammered a massive clawed fist against the metallic surface of his seat, sending harmonics rippling through the chamber's acoustic design. "Explain," Morvala demanded, her compound eyes focusing with laser intensity. Krosoth activated the holodisplay embedded in his gauntlet. Above his palm materialized a 3-dimensional rendering of a human outpost, a small, unremarkable structure on the edge of contested space. Our stealth cruisers were positioned for reconnaissance of the human defensive network in the Proxima Centauri system. All standard protocols were observed. Detection was deemed impossible by our strategic analysis. He manipulated the display, zooming in on a particular section of the outpost. At 0317 standard hours, a human officer entered this command center, carrying what our intelligence identifies as a coffee mug. The liquid within was spilled onto a console which, by coincidence, controlled a previously unknown resonance detection array. Krosoth paused, his inner eyelids flickering in discomfort. The coffee created a short circuit that caused the detection array to emit a random energy pulse. This pulse happened to be at precisely the frequency to disrupt our stealth systems. Our ships became visible. The humans, startled but opportunistic, disabled our vessels with targeted EMP bursts before our captains could respond. Silence gripped the chamber, heavy and suffocating. "Coffee," Morvala finally said, the word alien and awkward from her non-human vocal apparatus. "We have been studying humanity for 30 cycles. We have analyzed their military tactics, their technological capabilities, their biological limitations. And yet they defeat our most sophisticated technology with a beverage?" Counselor Duvok rose to his full height, towering over his seat. "This is beyond humiliation. The humans mock us. They deliberately engineered this incident to shame us before the galactic community." "Impossible," Krosoth responded immediately. "Our intelligence confirms the human was simply careless. A night shift operator who had been, according to their communications, pulling a double." The humans themselves were surprised by the outcome. "That makes it worse." Duvok's bioluminescent patterns flashed in angry pulses. "They defeat us by accident. I propose immediate and overwhelming retaliation. 3 planetary bombardments should suffice to restore our honor." Counselor Vex rumbled his agreement, but Morvala raised a limb for silence. "The situation is delicate," she said. "Human space is expanding. Their technology evolves rapidly, if chaotically. A direct assault could unite their fractious planetary governments and trigger a prolonged conflict. We must respond, but with precision." "There is an alternative," Krosoth said carefully. He had considered this option during the 3-day journey back to Vazrathi space, turning it over in his mind like a complex tactical puzzle. "The ancient rite of champion combat?" Attention shifted to him instantly. "Explain," Morvala commanded. "Before our species mastered interstellar travel, disputes between clans were sometimes resolved through ritual combat between chosen warriors. This tradition preserves honor, while minimizing broader conflict. We could challenge the humans to send their greatest warrior to face our champion." Duvok's spines dimmed skeptically. "You would reduce an interstellar incident to a primitive duel?" "Not primitive," Krosoth countered. "Sacred. The outcome would be binding on both parties. If our champion prevails, the humans must acknowledge their defeat and make appropriate concessions. Should their champion somehow succeed, we would gain valuable intelligence on human combat capabilities while limiting our exposure." Morvala's compound eyes shifted as she processed the suggestion. It has been 7 generations since the right was invoked for interspecies conflict. "But the precedent exists," Krosoth pressed. "The hegemony will recognize its validity." A low murmur of discussion rippled through the council. Vex drummed his claws, thoughtfully, against his carapace. "Who would be our champion?" Morvala didn't hesitate. "Grand Executor Gilorax." The name alone caused a ripple of reaction through the chamber. Krosoth felt his secondary heart stutter in its rhythm. "Bloodrinker," someone whispered from the shadows. "Is that necessary?" Krosoth asked, instantly regretting the question as Morvala's attention sharpened on him. "You suggest the ritual, Commander, yet balk at its proper execution? Gilorax is our finest warrior. The humans must face the full might of Vazrathi combat excellence." "Of course, High Counselor," Krosoth bowed his head. "I merely considered that Gilorax might be excessive for what is essentially a diplomatic resolution." "Diplomacy through dominance is the Vazrathi way," Morvala said flatly. "Summon Gilorax from the training grounds. Prepare the formal challenge to be transmitted to human space." Krosoth saluted, pressing his armored fist against his chestplate with a metallic ring. "It shall be done, High Counselor." As he turned to leave, Morvala added, "And Commander, ensure the transmission specifies that, should their champion fall, as is inevitable, we will claim 3 of their colony worlds as recompense for our humiliation." Krosoth paused fractionally. "And if their champion should prevail?" The question drew hisses of disbelief from the council. Morvala's mandibles clicked once, in what Krosoth recognized as amusement. "Then we shall grant them whatever trivial concession they request. The universe itself would have to unravel before a human could defeat Gilorax in ritual combat." Krosoth bowed again and exited the chamber, his exoskeleton whirring softly as he moved through the arched doorway. In the curved corridor beyond, illuminated by the soft glow of bioluminescent panels, he allowed himself a moment of private doubt. The humans were unpredictable. That quality made them dangerous in ways the Council refused to acknowledge. Defeating them with overwhelming force was one matter. Facing them in single combat, where their chaotic nature might find expression, was another. But orders were orders. He opened a secure channel to the Vazrathi training complex on the outer moon and prepared to summon the Empire's deadliest warrior. 3 weeks later, Krosoth stood in the vast hangar bay of the Vazrathi capital ship, Final Mercy, watching as Grand Executor Gilorax's personal shuttle docked with mechanical precision. Around him, the hangar buzzed with activity as maintenance drones and technicians prepared for the journey to the neutral space where the ritual combat would take place. The shuttle's ramp descended with a pneumatic hiss, and the hangar fell silent. Gilorax emerged like a living weapon, standing nearly 3 meters tall. His exoskeleton was augmented with ceremonial battle armor, inscribed with the names of his vanquished opponents. His natural carapace had been biochemically enhanced to a density approaching that of industrial ceramics, and the characteristic Vazrathi bioluminescence pulsed along his body in controlled, intimidating patterns of deep red and amber. but it was his face that commanded attention. Unlike most Vazrathi, whose mandibles featured two primary pincers, Gilarax possessed four, the result of genetic modification and combat enhancements. His compound eyes had been surgically altered to provide enhanced spectrum vision, giving them an unsettling iridescent quality. Where most of his kind had two arms, he had four, the additional pair smaller, but equipped with razor-sharp blades that could extend from hidden sheaths. "Commander Krosoth," Gilarax's voice resonated at a frequency designed to unsettle opponents. "I am told you arranged this entertainment." Krosoth performed the formal salute of respect. "Grand Executor, the Council determined that ritual combat was the appropriate response to human provocation." Gilarax moved forward, his gait smooth despite his imposing size. "I have studied the reports. Coffee." He pronounced the word with perfect clarity, having clearly practiced it. "I look forward to demonstrating the difference between liquid and blood." "The human response to our challenge arrived yesterday," Krosoth said, falling into step beside the towering warrior as they moved toward the command deck. "They have accepted the terms." "Of course they accepted," Gilarax rumbled. "Their species craves validation. They believe they can stand equal to the Vazrathi." "They named their champion?" "Yes, a Staff Sergeant Jack Murphy of their Marine Corps. Our intelligence has limited information on this individual, though apparently he has combat experience in 3 system conflicts." Gilarax made a sound that approximated laughter. 3 conflicts. I have ended 72 wars personally." They entered a lift tube that would carry them to the ship's upper levels. As the doors sealed and they began to ascend, Krosoth carefully chose his words. "Grand Executor, while victory seems assured, I believe we should consider the unpredictable nature of humans. Their apparent chaos sometimes conceals—" "I have studied human physiology extensively," Gilarax interrupted. "Their skeletal structure is internal and fragile. Their musculature relies on inefficient chemical processes. Their visual acuity is limited to a narrow spectrum. Their reaction time is approximately 1.3 times slower than our own." He flexed his secondary arms, the blades partially extending with a soft metallic whisper. "These are not the attributes of a species that poses a challenge." "Their unpredictability is not a physical attribute," Krosoth persisted. "It manifests in their approach to problems, their tactical decisions." The lift doors opened onto the command deck, and Gilarax stepped out. "Unpredictability is merely a compensatory mechanism for inferior capabilities. It will not save this Jack Murphy from his fate." Krosoth followed. Observing the respect and fear Gilarax commanded as crew members hurried to clear his path. It was true that no living being had ever defeated the Grand Executor in formal combat. Perhaps his concerns were unwarranted. "The human delegation will rendezvous with us at the designated coordinates in 7 standard days," Krosoth explained, as they approached the tactical display dominating the center of the command deck. "The neutral arena has been prepared according to ritual specifications, with adjustments for human atmospheric requirements." Gilarax studied the holographic representation of the arena, a circular platform 100 meters in diameter, surrounded by observation areas, protected by energy barriers. "Atmospheric adjustments," he muttered disdainfully. "They cannot even breathe properly." "The ritual demands equal conditions," Krosoth reminded him. "Your enhancements will function normally in Earth standard gravity and atmosphere." "And my opponent, will he be enhanced?" "Unknown. Human military personnel sometimes utilize combat stimulants and minor cybernetic augmentations, though nothing approaching Vazrathi standards. Our intelligence suggests their Marines receive extensive physical conditioning but limited technological enhancement." Gilarax's bioluminescence pulsed with confidence. "Then this ritual will be brief, but instructive for the humans. They will learn their place in the cosmic order." "Indeed," Krosoth said. though something in his tone must have betrayed his lingering concern. Gilarax turned his full attention to the commander. "You doubt the outcome, Krosoth?" "Not the outcome, Grand Executor. Only the certainty with which we predict it." "You give these creatures too much credit." "Perhaps," Krosoth acknowledged. "But I have observed that those who underestimate humans often do not survive to correct their assessment." Gilarax's mandibles clicked in amusement. "I am not those. I am Gilarax, and I have never underestimated an opponent. I have simply never encountered one worthy of my full capacity." He gestured to the tactical display. "Prepare a comprehensive briefing on human combat techniques. I will study them thoroughly, though it will make little difference to the result." "As you wish." Krosoth bowed slightly. "I will also arrange for simulations based on observed human military tactics." "Good. Now leave me. I must prepare my mind for the ritual." Krosoth exited the command deck, his concerns neither alleviated nor confirmed. The journey to the neutral space would take 5 days at maximum sustainable speed. 5 days to prepare Gilarax for whatever the humans might present. 5 days to consider what it might mean if the unthinkable happened and the Grand Executor failed. The designated day arrived with ceremonial precision. The final Mercy maintained position at the specified coordinates, its massive silhouette casting a shadow across the artificial structure that would host the ritual combat. The arena, constructed centuries ago by a now-extinct species, floated in the void like a perfect silver disk, its ancient technology still maintaining the environmental conditions necessary for various life forms. Krosoth stood on the observation deck, watching as sensors detected an approaching vessel. He expected a human military craft, perhaps one of their destroyers or specialized combat transports. What appeared instead defied expectations. "Commander," the sensor officer called, confusion evident in his voice. "The human vessel is irregular." The view screen shifted to display the approaching ship. It was relatively small, perhaps a quarter the size of the Final Mercy, and appeared to be civilian in design. Its hull was painted in bright colors, with what seemed to be stylized flames along the sides and some form of human script emblazoned across the bow. "Magnify," Krosoth ordered. The image zoomed in on the writing. The translation matrix processed the human language and provided the Vazrathi equivalent. Party barge. "Is this some form of deception?" Gilarax had entered the observation deck silently, his imposing presence immediately commanding attention. "They send a pleasure craft to a ritual combat?" Krosoth had no answer. "Open communications." The communications officer complied, and after a moment, a human face appeared on the main screen. The individual wore what appeared to be a formal military uniform, though it seemed hastily assembled. "This is Captain Harrington of the United Earth Alliance," the human said, her expression professionally neutral. "We are here for the, duel thing." Krosoth stepped forward. "I am Commander Krosoth of the Vazrathi Empire. We expected a military vessel." The human captain's expression flickered briefly. "Yes. Well, there was a scheduling conflict with our military transports. This civilian craft volunteered to bring our champion." She paused. "It was the fastest option available on short notice." "Your lack of protocol is noted," Krosoth said stiffly. "We will proceed according to the ritual requirements. The arena is prepared. Your champion may board when ready." "About that," Captain Harrington said, looking uncomfortable. "Staff Sergeant Murphy is preparing. He'll be ready for the scheduled time." "The ritual begins in 1 standard hour," Krosoth reminded her. "He'll be there," she assured him, though something in her tone suggested uncertainty. The communication ended, and Gilarax turned to Krosoth, his bioluminescence patterns shifting to indicate skepticism. "They mock us," the Grand Executor said. "This is deliberate disrespect." "Perhaps," Krosoth replied, though he wasn't certain. "Or perhaps it reflects their chaotic approach to matters we consider sacred." "It changes nothing," Gilarax declared. "I will defeat their champion regardless of which vessel delivers him to his doom." 1 hour later, Krosoth and Gilarax stood at the entrance to the arena. The ancient structure hummed with power, as environmental systems maintained Earth-standard conditions on one side and Vazrathi optimal conditions on the other, with a gradual transition in the center where combat would occur. The Vazrathi delegation had arrived with appropriate ceremony, a formal procession of officers in dress armor, ritual objects carried on cushioned platforms, ancestral weapons displayed with reverence. They now occupied their designated observation area, a tiered section allowing clear views of the combat zone. The human delegation, by contrast, consisted of Captain Harrington, 2 junior officers, and what appeared to be the crew of the party barge, civilians in colorful attire who seemed more suited to a social gathering than a solemn ritual. "Where is their champion?" Gilarax demanded, his patience visibly thinning as his bioluminescence shifted toward aggressive patterns. Captain Harrington checked a device on her wrist. "He's on his way, just finalizing his, preparation ritual." As if summoned by her words, a new figure appeared at the human entrance to the arena. Staff Sergeant Jack Murphy was not what Krosoth had expected. Of average height for a human male, Murphy had the muscular build typical of their military, but his uniform was in disarray, the top buttons undone, sleeves rolled unevenly. His hair, which should have been neatly trimmed according to human military standards, was disheveled. Most notably, his eyes were partially closed, and he moved with a strange, unsteady gait. In one hand, he carried a large container filled with dark liquid. In the other, what appeared to be a small package of food. "Sorry I'm late," Murphy announced, his voice carrying across the arena. "Rough night. Where's the alien I'm supposed to fight?" Gilarax stepped forward, his full 3-meter height emphasized by the ceremonial armor he now wore, bioluminescent patterns blazing in intimidating sequences across his carapace. All 4 of his arms extended to combat readiness, secondary blades gleaming in the arena's lighting. "I am Gilarax, Grand Executor of the Vazrathi Empire, Bloodrinker, Ender of Wars, Conqueror of 7 systems." His voice boomed through the space, translation systems ensuring the humans understood every word. "I stand as champion of my people." Murphy squinted at the towering alien warrior. He took a long drink from his container before responding. "Cool. Jack Murphy, Staff Sergeant, United Earth Marine Corps." He raised his beverage in a casual salute. "Let's get this over with. I've got a wicked hangover." Krosoth felt a ripple of confusion. Hangover did not translate properly, the closest Vazrathi concept related to ritual fasting before combat, which didn't seem to apply here. Gilarax appeared equally puzzled, but quickly recovered his imposing demeanor. "You face your death with admirable acceptance, human." Murphy shrugged. "Whatever, man. They told me if I won this thing, we get trading rights in the Proxima system, and I get a month's paid leave." He took another swig from his container. "Worth a shot." A ceremonial horn sounded, signaling the formal commencement of the ritual. Krosoth moved to the officiator's position, a raised platform between the observation areas. By ancient tradition, by the laws of the hegemony, and by mutual agreement of the Vazrathi Empire and the United Earth Alliance, this ritual combat shall resolve the dispute between our peoples, he announced formally. Combat shall continue until surrender, incapacitation, or death. Interference from observers is forbidden under penalty of forfeit. He raised his hand, holding a ceremonial scepter that would release a pulse of energy to start the combat. Prepare yourselves, champions. Gilarax assumed a formal combat stance, his forearms positioned in the traditional opening posture of Vazrathi martial discipline. His bioluminescence shifted to deep crimson, the battle color. Murphy set his food package on the ground, took one more drink, and then stretched his neck from side to side, producing audible popping sounds that caused several Vazrathi observers to flinch. "Ready whenever," the human called casually. Krosoth brought down the scepter. A pulse of blue energy rippled across the arena floor. "Begin!" Gilarax moved with startling speed for his size, crossing the distance to Murphy in a blur of motion. His primary arms extended in a grappling maneuver designed to immobilize opponents before his secondary arms delivered killing strikes. It should have ended the combat in seconds. Instead, Murphy, apparently distracted by something in his beverage, stumbled sideways at precisely the moment Gilarax would have seized him. The Vazrathi warrior's arms closed on empty air as the human dropped to one knee, desperately trying not to spill his drink. "Whoa! Little warning next time," Murphy complained, regaining his feet and backing away. Gilarax recovered instantly, recalibrating his approach. He launched into a complex attack sequence, primary arms sweeping in coordinated arcs, while his secondary blades flashed toward the human's torso. Murphy, appearing to have something in his eye, bent over and rubbed at his face just as the blades passed through the space where his chest had been. He straightened, completely unaware of how close he had come to being eviscerated. "Hang on," the human said, blinking rapidly. "Got something in my contact lens." Gilarax growled in frustration and executed a powerful spinning attack, his armored exoskeleton generating enough force to shatter stone. Murphy, in the process of taking another drink, stumbled on a perfectly flat section of the arena floor and fell backwards, the attack passing harmlessly overhead as he landed on his back. Some of his beverage splashed upward, spattering across Gilarax's face. The liquid hit the Vazrathi's compound eyes, and he recoiled with a roar of pain and surprise. The substance, coffee mixed with what smelled like alcoholic compounds and energy stimulants, burned in his sensitive optical receptors. "Oh shit, sorry about that," Murphy called, scrambling to his feet as Gilarax clawed at his eyes. "Didn't mean to waste perfectly good coffee." In the observation area, Krosoth watched with growing disbelief. The human wasn't employing any recognizable combat technique. He wasn't even attempting to attack Gilarax. Yet somehow, through what appeared to be pure accident, he was avoiding the Grand Executor's lethal strikes. Gilarax, vision partially restored, charged again with a bellow of rage. This time, his attack was less disciplined, driven by frustration. He swung a massive primary arm in a sweeping blow that would have decapitated the human. Murphy, who had bent down to retrieve his food package, remained untouched as the blow passed over him. He straightened, unwrapping what appeared to be a sandwich. "You want some?" he offered, holding it toward Gilarax. "It's bacon. Always helps my hangover." The Grand Executor's bioluminescence shifted to patterns Krosoth had never seen before. Confusion mixed with outrage. He launched into his most devastating attack sequence, one that had defeated champions across 3 galactic sectors. What followed defied explanation. Murphy, taking a bite of his sandwich, suddenly clutched his stomach and doubled over, causing Gilarax's precision strikes to miss yet again. The human made a pained sound. "Oh man, I knew that 5th tequila shot was a mistake," he groaned, then abruptly retched. The contents of his stomach, a noxious combination of partially digested food, alcohol, and coffee, projected directly onto Gilarax's chest plate, splattering across the ceremonial inscriptions and seeping into joints of his exoskeleton. The arena fell utterly silent. Gilarax stood frozen in shock, looking down at the biological contamination now coating his sacred armor. In 200 years of combat, no opponent had ever defiled him in such a manner. Sorry. Murphy wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Better out than in, right? With a roar that shook the arena, Gilarax abandoned all pretense of formal combat. He charged the human with pure berserker fury, all four arms extended with lethal intent. Murphy, still recovering from his nausea, stumbled backward. His foot landed on the sandwich he had dropped, causing him to slip. As he fell, his flailing arm caught Gilarax's attacking limb, redirecting its momentum. The Vazrathi warrior, unable to check his charge, was pulled forward by his own force. Gilarax crashed to the arena floor with a thunderous impact. One of his secondary blades, still extended, penetrated his own armor at an awkward angle, drawing ichor. Murphy, somehow landing in a seated position on the fallen warrior's back, looked around in confusion. Did I win? Krosoth stared in astonishment. The greatest warrior in Vazrathi history lay prone, self-wounded, while the disheveled human sat atop him like a rider on a beast of burden. Gilarax struggled to rise, his bioluminescence fluctuating wildly in patterns of rage and humiliation. As he regained his footing, dislodging Murphy in the process, his movements were notably less coordinated. The impact had damaged something in his exoskeleton. You, Gilarax's voice trembled with fury, are not fighting with honor. Murphy, brushing himself off, looked genuinely confused. I'm fighting? I thought I was just trying not to throw up again. The human's apparent confusion seemed to infuriate Gilarax further. He charged again, but his damaged exoskeleton caused a slight imbalance in his gait. As he reached Murphy, the human, appearing to finally recognize the danger, attempted an awkward defensive posture that resembled no martial art Krosoth had ever observed. Their movements collided in chaotic fashion. Murphy slipped again, his hand instinctively grabbing at Gilarax for support. His fingers caught one of the Grand Executor's breathing tubes, a vulnerable point in Vazrathi physiology that experienced warriors protected instinctively. But Gilarax, consumed by rage and battling his damaged systems, had neglected this basic defense. The tube tore free from its connection as Murphy fell, causing an immediate respiratory crisis for the Vazrathi warrior. Gilarax staggered backward, emergency systems in his exoskeleton deploying to compensate for the oxygen deficiency. Warning lights flashed across his armor as bioluminescence patterns shifted to distress indicators. Murphy got to his feet, still holding the disconnected breathing tube, looking at it with bewilderment. Is this important? My bad. Krosoth had seen enough. As officiator, he had the authority to end combat if a champion was at risk of death from dishonorable means. While the human's actions seemed unintentional rather than dishonorable, the result was the same. Gilarax was in grave danger. He raised the ceremonial scepter. Halt! The combat is suspended! Medical teams rushed into the arena as Gilarax collapsed to one knee, emergency protocols barely keeping him conscious. Murphy stood awkwardly to the side, still clutching the breathing tube, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern. I didn't mean to break him, the human said to no one in particular. Is he going to be okay? The Vazrathi medics worked quickly, reattaching the breathing tube and administering emergency treatments. After several tense minutes, the chief medical officer approached Krosoth. The Grand Executor will recover, the medic reported. But he requires immediate attention in our medical facilities. Combat cannot resume today. Krosoth nodded gravely. Understood. He turned to address the arena. By the power vested in me as officiator, I declare this ritual combat inconclusive. The Grand Executor has sustained an accidental injury that prevents continuation. By tradition, such circumstances require diplomatic resolution. Captain Harrington had entered the arena and stood beside Murphy, who was attempting to clean himself up with limited success. "Agreed," she said, her expression professionally neutral, though Krossoth detected a hint of relief. "We propose an immediate diplomatic conference aboard our vessel." "Aboard the party barge?" Krossoth couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. "Ambassador Takagi arrived during the combat," Harrington explained. "She's prepared to discuss terms." Krossoth glanced at Gilarax, now being transported to a medical capsule. The Grand Executor's bioluminescence had dimmed to embarrassed patterns, his fearsome presence diminished by the ignominious outcome. "Very well," Krossoth agreed. "I will accompany you with a small delegation." As they prepared to leave the arena, Murphy approached Gilarax's medical capsule. The Vazrathi warrior's compound eyes focused on the human with what might have been hatred, confusion, or a mixture of both. "Hey, no hard feelings, right?" Murphy said, offering what humans called a thumbs-up gesture. "You're pretty scary. Probably would have killed me if I wasn't so out of it." Gilarax stared at the human for a long moment before responding. His voice weakened, but still carrying the resonant quality of his station. "You are unlike any opponent I have faced." Murphy grinned. "Thanks, I think. Get better soon, big guy." As the medical team transported Gilarax to the final mercy, Krossoth fell into step beside Captain Harrington. "Your champion's technique is unorthodox," he observed carefully. Harrington glanced at Murphy, who was now trying to clean a stain from his uniform by spitting on it and rubbing vigorously. "Staff Sergeant Murphy is one of our most unpredictable assets," she said diplomatically. "That's why we selected him." "You selected him because he is unpredictable?" Krossoth was genuinely puzzled. "Not for his combat prowess or strategic mind." "In a way, his unpredictability is his combat prowess," Harrington explained. "We've found that Vazrathi warriors are exceptionally skilled against opponents who follow recognizable patterns. Murphy doesn't follow patterns because half the time, even he doesn't know what he's going to do next." Krossoth considered this as they boarded a shuttle to the human vessel. The concept was alien to Vazrathi military doctrine, which emphasized precision, discipline, and carefully honed technique. The idea of weaponizing chaos itself was disturbing, yet fascinating. The party barge, despite its frivolous name and exterior, contained a surprisingly formal diplomatic suite. Ambassador Yumi Takagi greeted the Vazrathi delegation with proper protocol, displaying a knowledge of their customs that Krossoth found both impressive and somewhat unsettling. "Commander Krossoth, I am pleased to meet you." Ambassador Takagi bowed precisely to the correct depth for his rank. "I hope we can resolve this situation to the benefit of both our peoples." "As do I, Ambassador." Krossoth returned the gesture. "I've prepared refreshments suitable for Vazrathi physiology." She gestured to a table set with various containers. "And I've brought a small sampling of Earth cuisine, should you wish to expand your cultural understanding." The diplomatic discussions that followed were remarkably productive. Without the looming shadow of ritual combat, both sides found common ground on trade routes through the Proxima system, technological exchange protocols, and security arrangements for the contested border regions. As the formal negotiations concluded, Ambassador Takagi presented Krossoth with a small, ornate box. "A gesture of goodwill from Earth," she explained. "Various samples of the beverage that inadvertently started this situation." Krossoth opened the box to find several sealed containers of coffee beans, each labeled with its origin and flavor characteristics. "I am uncertain how to respond," he admitted. Takagi smiled. "Consider it the beginning of cultural exchange. Coffee is central to many human social interactions. By understanding it, you gain insight into our species." "An intriguing perspective," Krossoth said, carefully closing the box. As the diplomats finalized the written agreements, Krosoth observed Murphy at the refreshment table. The staff sergeant, now somewhat recovered from his hangover state, was explaining Earth foods to several curious junior Vazrathi officers. "This," Murphy held up a small red bottle, "is hot sauce. It adds spice to food. Makes it more interesting." One of the Vazrathi, braver than his companions, extended a sensory appendage toward the offered condiment. The creature's bioluminescence flared dramatically upon contact, cycling through several emergency patterns, before settling on what Krosoth recognized as sensory pleasure. "That's right," Murphy encouraged. "Gets you right in the taste receptors, doesn't it? We've got thousands of varieties back on Earth." By the time the diplomatic party returned to the final mercy, Krosoth had reached a decision. In his quarters, he composed his report to the Grand Council, choosing his words with careful precision. "The ritual combat has provided valuable insights into human capabilities," he wrote. "While technologically less advanced in many areas, humans possess qualities that make them unpredictable opponents and potentially valuable allies. Their chaotic nature, which we have previously considered a weakness, may in fact be an evolutionary adaptation that serves them well in crisis situations." He paused, considering how to phrase his recommendation. "I believe that conquest of human space would require resources disproportionate to the gains. Their unpredictability would make occupation costly and continuing resistance likely. Instead, I recommend formalized alliance, with cultural and technological exchange programs to build mutual understanding." Krosoth sent the report, knowing it would be controversial among the more aggressive council members. But the evidence was clear. Humans represented something new in the Vazrathi experience, a species that thrived on chaos rather than conquering it. 2 days later, as the final mercy prepared to return to Vazrathi space, Krosoth received a surprising visitor. Grand Executor Gilarax, recovered enough to move about though still wearing medical monitoring devices, requested entry to his quarters. "Grand Executor," Krosoth greeted him formally, "I am pleased to see your recovery progressing." Gilarax's bioluminescence patterns were subdued, indicating thoughtfulness rather than the aggression that typically defined him. "I have been reviewing the combat recordings," he said without preamble. "The human did not defeat me through skill or strength." "No," Krosoth agreed carefully. "And yet, I was defeated." Gilarax seemed to be working through a difficult concept. "In 200 years of combat, no opponent has ever survived my initial attack sequence, much less caused me injury. The human Murphy is atypical." "Is he?" Gilarax's compound eyes focused intently on Krosoth. "Or is he representative of their species in ways we have failed to understand?" Krosoth considered his response carefully. "I believe humans cultivate unpredictability as we cultivate precision. Their strength lies not in following patterns, but in breaking them." Gilarax was silent for a moment. "I have requested assignment as military liaison to the human embassy when it is established." The statement was so unexpected that Krosoth momentarily lost his composure. "You wish to work with humans? After your experience?" "Because of my experience," Gilarax corrected. "I have encountered something I do not understand. This is unacceptable. I must learn." Krosoth felt a new respect for the Grand Executor. Few warriors of his stature would respond to humiliation with curiosity rather than vengeance. "I believe the Council will approve your request," he said. "Ambassador Takagi has suggested a cultural exchange program, including military training exercises." "Good." Gilarax turned to leave, then paused. "The human Murphy. What becomes of him?" "According to Captain Harrington, he receives his month of paid leave as promised." After that, Ambassador Takagi has requested him as a cultural attaché for 6 weeks. She believes his unique perspective will be valuable during the initial exchange. Gilarax's bioluminescence flickered in what might have been amusement. I will see him again. Then. So it would seem. After Gilarax departed, Krosoth reviewed the final diplomatic protocols one last time before transmission to both governments. The incident that had begun with spilled coffee would end with new understanding between species. It was not the outcome any Vazrathi had anticipated, but perhaps it was the one they needed. 6 weeks later, Krosoth stood in the observation lounge of the newly established joint Vazrathi-human diplomatic station, orbiting Proxima Centauri b. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, the red dwarf star cast a warm glow across the gathered dignitaries. Ambassador Takagi had organized a reception to celebrate the successful implementation of the initial trade agreements. Representatives from both species mingled with cautious optimism, cultural misunderstandings giving way to genuine attempts at communication. In one corner of the lounge, a scene unfolded that Krosoth could never have imagined 6 weeks earlier. Staff Sergeant Murphy, still technically attached to the diplomatic mission, was attempting to teach Grand Executor Gilarax a human dance movement called the robot. No, more jerky, Murphy demonstrated, moving his limbs in mechanical stops and starts. Like your joints are locked. You've got the right biology for this, Gilarax. His bioluminescence patterns indicating concentration mixed with what might have been enjoyment, attempted to replicate the movements. His forearms moved in awkward synchronization. Like this, human Murphy? Getting there, G-man. Maybe lock your mandibles for effect? Krosoth accepted a cup of coffee from a passing server. He had developed a taste for the beverage, particularly a variety called espresso that matched the efficiency of Vazrathi refreshments. Ambassador Takagi joined him at the viewport. Quite a sight, isn't it? 6 weeks ago, they were trying to kill each other. I believe only one was actively attempting lethal action, Krosoth corrected. The other was simply trying to manage his digestive distress. Takagi laughed. Sometimes the most significant diplomatic breakthroughs come from the most unlikely circumstances. Indeed, Krosoth sipped his coffee, allowing himself to enjoy the complex flavors. My superiors remain skeptical about this alliance, but the preliminary results are promising. Trade volume has increased 15% in the first month alone. And the cultural exchange program has 37 Vazrathi participants and 52 humans, Takagi added. Though I'm not sure teaching Gilarax the robot was what we had in mind. They watched as Murphy attempted a more complex movement, nearly colliding with a Vazrathi diplomat in the process. Gilarax, showing unexpected reflexes, caught the human before he could fall and set him upright with surprising gentleness. Your staff sergeant continues to spread chaos wherever he goes, Krosoth observed. We wouldn't have him any other way, Takagi smiled. In fact, he's been approved for an extended assignment. It seems Gilarax specifically requested him as a combat trainer. Krosoth nearly choked on his coffee. Combat trainer? Murphy's technique consists primarily of accidental evasion and biological malfunction. Precisely, Takagi said. Gilarax believes your warriors could benefit from understanding how humans approach the unexpected. He calls it anti-pattern recognition training. The concept was so foreign to traditional Vazrathi military doctrine that Krosoth needed a moment to process it. Yet, he could not deny the evidence before him. The greatest warrior in the Empire was voluntarily learning from a hungover human who had defeated him through what amounted to a series of accidents. Perhaps, Krosoth said thoughtfully, there is wisdom in chaos after all. Across the lounge, Murphy had somehow convinced Gilarax to attempt a human gesture called a high five. The resulting clash of human palm against Vazrathi exoskeleton produced a sound that drew attention from throughout the gathering. "Sorry! Sorry!" Murphy's voice carried across the room. "Forgot about the density difference. Everyone's fine." Gilarax's bioluminescence cycled through patterns of embarrassment, amusement, and something new. A configuration Krosoth had never seen before in all his years of service alongside Vazrathi warriors. It took him a moment to recognize it. But when he did, the realization was profound. It was the pattern for friendship. "Ambassador," Krosoth turned to Takagi. "I believe I would like to learn more about human coffee culture. I understand it involves sitting for extended periods in specialized venues, consuming caffeine while engaging in unstructured conversation." "It does indeed," Takagi smiled. "I know just the place on the human section of the station. They even have pastries compatible with Vazrathi biochemistry." As they moved to exit the lounge, Krosoth cast one last glance at Murphy and Gilarax, now attempting some new human ritual involving locked arms and a spinning motion. It ended, predictably, in both of them colliding with a refreshment table, sending platters of carefully prepared cross-species cuisine flying in all directions. Diplomats scattered, some outraged, others laughing. Gilarax, covered in what appeared to be a mixture of earth chocolate and Vazrathi protein gel, looked momentarily mortified until Murphy scooped some of the combination from his own uniform and tasted it. "You know," the staff sergeant declared loudly, "this isn't half bad together. Somebody write down this recipe." Chaos, Krosoth reflected as he followed Takagi from the room. Sometimes created possibilities that order could never imagine. It was a lesson worth remembering for the challenging alliance that lay ahead, and it had all started with a spilled cup of coffee. 6 months after the fateful ritual combat, the Vazrathi human diplomatic station orbiting Proxima Centauri b had evolved from a tentative outpost into a thriving hub of interspecies cooperation. The station, officially designated Joint Harmony, but colloquially known as Murphy's Law among both humans and Vazrathi, had expanded to accommodate the growing number of diplomatic personnel, cultural exchange participants, and commercial representatives. Commander Krosoth stood in his newly appointed office, reviewing the latest security reports. As chief liaison officer between Vazrathi military forces and human defense initiatives, his role had grown in both scope and significance. The walls of his office reflected this cultural integration: traditional Vazrathi battle trophies shared space with human artifacts, including a framed coffee bean collection presented by Ambassador Takagi and a holographic display of Earth's oceans in constant motion. "Commander," his assistant's voice came through the communication system. "High Counselor Morvala has arrived for the inspection tour." Krosoth's bioluminescence flickered briefly in surprise. "The High Counselor is 2 days early." "Yes, Commander. She states it is intentional." Of course it was. Morvala had made her skepticism about the human alliance clear from the beginning. Arriving ahead of schedule was precisely the type of maneuver she would employ to catch potential problems before they could be concealed. "I will meet her at Docking Bay 3, Krosoth said, straightening his ceremonial armor. The diplomatic post required less militant attire than his previous assignments, but Morvala would expect proper military protocol. As he made his way through the station's curved corridors, Krosoth noted the visible changes 6 months of coexistence had produced. Signage appeared in both Vazrathi, luminescent script, and human languages. Environmental settings cycled subtly to accommodate the different atmospheric preferences of both species. Most striking were the integrated work teams, humans and Vazrathi, collaborating on maintenance tasks, security protocols, and research initiatives with growing efficiency. Docking Bay 3 hummed with activity as the High Counselor's shuttle completed its connection sequence. Krosoth assembled the appropriate reception line, including both Vazrathi officers and their human counterparts. Ambassador Takagi stood beside him, her formal diplomatic attire incorporating subtle elements of Vazrathi design, a gesture of respect that would not go unnoticed. "The High Counselor can be demanding," Krosoth warned quietly. Takagi nodded. "I've studied her psychological profile. Direct, traditional, values hierarchy and protocol. I'll ensure our human staff understand the importance of proper deference." The shuttle door opened with a hydraulic hiss, and High Counselor Morvala emerged like a living embodiment of Vazrathi imperial power. Her exoskeleton, augmented with ceremonial enhancements indicating her political rank, gleamed under the docking bay lights. 4 honor guards flanked her, their weapons ornamental but still very functional. "High Counselor!" Krosoth performed the formal greeting, bending precisely to the angle required for her station. "The Joint Harmony Station welcomes you." Morvala's compound eyes surveyed the assembled greeting party, lingering momentarily on the humans present. Her mandibles clicked once, a sound Krosoth recognized as mild disapproval. "Commander Krosoth," she acknowledged, her voice carrying the harmonic resonance of the ruling class. "I see you have embraced your diplomatic role with characteristic thoroughness." "I serve the Empire as required," he responded, recognizing the subtle challenge in her statement. Ambassador Takagi stepped forward and performed a flawless Vazrathi greeting, including the rarely mastered mandible click vocalization that few humans could produce correctly. "High Counselor Morvala, I am Ambassador Yumi Takagi of the United Earth Alliance. Your presence honors our station and strengthens our alliance." Morvala's bioluminescent patterns shifted to indicate surprise, briefly, before returning to formal neutrality. "Your command of our ceremonial protocols is noteworthy, Ambassador. I look forward to evaluating the progress of this experiment." "We have prepared a comprehensive tour," Krosoth said, "beginning with the command center and I will begin with the military training facilities." Morvala interrupted. "I understand Grand Executor Gilarax has implemented new combat methodologies. These are of particular interest to the Grand Council." Krosoth's inner eyelids flickered in concern. The training facilities were precisely where he would not choose to begin a diplomatic tour, especially with Morvala. Gilarax's unorthodox integration of human chaos theory into Vazrathi combat disciplines had produced impressive results, but remained controversial among traditionalists. "Of course, High Counselor. The training deck is prepared for your inspection." As they proceeded through the station, Morvala maintained a deliberate silence, her attention fixed on every detail of the integrated operation. Krosoth recognized the tactic. A high-ranking official's silence often extracted more information than direct questioning, as subordinates rushed to fill the uncomfortable void with revelations they might otherwise withhold. Ambassador Takagi, however, seemed unfazed. She walked alongside the High Counselor with professional composure, neither attempting to fill the silence nor appearing discomforted by it. The training deck doors opened to reveal a scene that made Krosoth suppress a reflexive groan. Grand Executor Gilarax stood in the center of the combat arena, his imposing form still intimidating despite the bizarre modifications to his training armor. Attached to his exoskeleton were what appeared to be randomly positioned obstacles, protrusions that limited his movement in unpredictable ways. Across from him, Staff Sergeant Murphy, now officially designated as Human Combat Integration Specialist, was demonstrating something to a mixed group of Vazrathi and human trainees. "You've got to be ready for anything," Murphy was saying, his voice carrying across the deck. "Traditional combat training teaches you what to do. This program teaches you what to do when you have no idea what to do." To demonstrate, he tossed a small object toward Gilarax without warning. instead of the precise defensive motion a Vazrathi warrior would typically employ. Gilarax deliberately stumbled backward, allowing the object to bounce off the random protrusions on his armor, before catching it with his secondary arms, while his primary limbs appeared to flail uncontrollably. The human trainees applauded. The Vazrathi observer's bioluminescence fluctuated in patterns indicating confusion, mixed with reluctant admiration. "What?" Morvala's voice cut through the training noise like a precision laser. "Is the meaning of this display?" The entire deck fell silent. Gilarax straightened immediately, his bioluminescence shifting to formal patterns as he recognized the High Counselor's presence. Murphy, either oblivious to or undeterred by the tension, grinned broadly. "High Counselor! Perfect timing! We're just demonstrating controlled chaos combat. Want to try it?" Krosoth moved quickly to intervene, before Murphy could say anything more catastrophically informal. "High Counselor, the Joint Combat Initiative integrates strengths from both our fighting traditions. Grand Executor Gilarax oversees all protocols to ensure they meet Imperial standards." Gilarax approached and performed the formal salute. "High Counselor, I can provide comprehensive data on the effectiveness of these methods. Our warriors have shown a 43% improvement in adaptation to unexpected combat scenarios." Morvala's compound eyes focused on the random protrusions attached to Gilarax's armor. "You dishonor the sacred combat forms of our ancestors. Grand Executor, your reputation was built on perfection of traditional disciplines, not whatever this is." "With respect, High Counselor," Gilarax replied, his tone carefully modulated. "Perfection in known forms creates predictability. The humans have demonstrated that unpredictability has tactical value." "G-Man's got a point," Murphy interjected, using the nickname that made Krosoth's secondary heart stutter in alarm. "Your traditional fighting style is amazing against opponents who fight fair. But the galaxy's full of folks who don't play by the rules." Morvala turned her full attention to Murphy, her bioluminescence shifting to patterns that would have sent any Vazrathi warrior into immediate defensive posture. "You are the human who defeated Gilarax through biological malfunction and accidental movements," she stated, mandibles clicking in what could only be described as disdain. Murphy gave a casual salute. "Staff Sergeant Jack Murphy, at your service." Though, to be fair, it wasn't just biological malfunction. There was also alcohol involved. Ambassador Takagi stepped forward smoothly. Staff Sergeant Murphy's unorthodox victory revealed potential advantages in cross-species tactical integration. The training program was jointly developed by Grand Executor Gilarax and our military advisors to benefit both species. "High Counselor," Krosoth added, "preliminary data suggest that Vazrathi warriors trained in these hybrid methods outperform traditional combat specialists in 76% of randomized scenarios." Morvala's attention shifted between the humans and Vazrathi present, her compound eyes processing every detail. Finally, she addressed Gilarax directly. "You will demonstrate this methodology in practical application. Grand Executor, select your 4 best students, 2 of each species. I will evaluate their performance personally." "Yes, High Counselor," Gilarax bowed. "We can prepare a demonstration for tomorrow's—" "Now, Grand Executor," Morvala interrupted. "Unpredictability should not require preparation, should it?" Krosoth recognized the trap immediately. Morvala was using the central tenet of the new training methodology against itself. If chaos and unpredictability were truly valuable, then the trainees should be able to demonstrate this without warning. "Of course, High Counselor," Gilarax responded without hesitation. "Murphy, assemble the Alpha team." Murphy gave a thumbs up and moved to a communication panel. Within minutes, 4 individuals had reported to the training deck, 2 Vazrathi warriors and 2 human marines, all wearing the integrated training uniforms of the Joint Combat Initiative. Morvala inspected them with critical attention. "These are your exemplary students." One of the humans, a compact female with close-cropped hair and the insignia of a lieutenant, stepped forward. "Lieutenant Sarah Johnston, High Counselor. Alpha Team specializes in adaptive response and cross-species tactical integration." The Vazrathi warrior beside her, younger than Gilarax but bearing the marks of combat experience, added, "4th Hunter Zathrex, formerly of the Imperial Third Fleet. We stand ready for evaluation." Morvala circled the team slowly, her bioluminescence patterns revealing nothing of her thoughts. "Very well. You will face the Sentinel Combat Unit." She gestured to one of her honor guards, who activated a device on his gauntlet. A section of the training deck wall slid open, revealing a containment chamber. From within emerged a sight that caused Krosoth's bioluminescence to flare in alarm. A Sentinel Combat Unit was one of the most advanced weapons in the Vazrathi arsenal, a semi-autonomous battle drone standing 3 meters tall. Its exoskeleton crafted from adaptive alloys that could reconfigure in response to damage. Multiple weapon systems protruded from its armored shell, and its sensor array glowed with the distinctive red pattern of active combat protocols. "High Counselor," Krosoth said carefully. "The Sentinel unit is designed for battlefield deployment against enemy fortifications. It exceeds standard training parameters by several orders of magnitude." "Indeed," Morvala replied. "If these new methods are to replace traditional combat disciplines, they should demonstrate superiority against the Empire's finest technology." The Alpha team exchanged glances. Lieutenant Johnston's expression remained professionally neutral, but Krosoth detected the slight tension in her posture. The Vazrathi team members' bioluminescence flickered in recognition patterns. They understood exactly what they faced. Murphy stepped forward. "Hold up. This isn't a fair assessment. The team trains with progressive difficulty scenarios. Throwing them against military hardware designed to level buildings isn't a test. It's just trying to make a point." "The point, human," Morvala's voice carried the distinctive harmonic of authority. "Is that combat is not fair? Is that not the foundation of your chaos theory? That one must be prepared for anything." Murphy opened his mouth to protest further, but Lieutenant Johnston placed a hand on his arm. "It's all right, Staff Sergeant." She turned to her team. "Alpha configuration. Adaptive response protocol." To Krosoth's surprise, the team showed no hesitation. They moved into position with well-practiced coordination. The humans and Vazrathi, arranging themselves in a formation that complemented their different physiologies and combat strengths. Gilarax stepped onto the elevated observation platform beside Morvala. "The demonstration will proceed under standard safety protocols. The Sentinel unit's weaponry has been configured to training intensity." Morvala's mandibles clicked once. "The Sentinel will operate at 30% combat efficiency. Sufficient to challenge but not endanger your students." Krosoth knew that even at 30%, the Sentinel was more than capable of inflicting serious injury. This was not evaluation. It was sabotage designed to discredit the entire program. Ambassador Takagi joined him at the edge of the training area, her expression concerned but composed. "This is a significant escalation. Is the High Counselor always so direct in her assessment methods?" "Morvala believes in the superiority of traditional Vazrathi approaches," Krosoth explained quietly. "The success of this integration threatens centuries of military doctrine." "And her political position," Takagi added perceptively. The Sentinel's activation sequence completed with a resonant hum that Krosoth felt in his exoskeleton. Its sensor array focused on the Alpha team, analyzing their formation and calculating optimal attack vectors. The drone's programming would be expecting traditional Vazrathi combat responses or standard human military tactics. What it would encounter instead remained to be seen. "Begin," Morvala commanded. The Sentinel moved with surprising speed for its size, charging directly toward the team with weapon systems powering up. Its tactics were straightforward, overwhelming force applied with precision. What happened next defied conventional combat logic. Instead of taking defensive positions or attempting to outflank the Sentinel, the Alpha team appeared to break formation in complete disarray. Lieutenant Johnston stumbled, as if losing her balance, while one of the Vazrathi warriors, Zathrex, seemed to trip over his own feet, colliding with his teammate. The Sentinel's targeting systems, programmed to predict movement patterns based on established combat disciplines, tracked their expected positions, firing its primary energy weapon at where disciplined warriors should have been. Instead, it hit empty space as the team's apparent incompetence scattered them beyond the predictive targeting cone. Murphy, watching from the sideline, grinned and pumped his fist. "That's it. Confuse the hell out of it." The second human team member, a broad-shouldered Marine whose nameplate read Kowalski, appeared to panic, throwing his training weapon aside and running directly toward the Sentinel rather than away from it. The drone, registering this as a suicidal charge, adjusted its weapon systems to target the approaching human. This distraction allowed Zathrex to execute what appeared to be a clumsy leap that somehow placed him on the Sentinel's backplating. His movements seemed uncoordinated, almost random, his limbs flailing against the drone's armor in what looked like desperation rather than technique. Yet Krosoth, watching closely, began to see the pattern within the chaos. Each accidental movement, each panicked response was placing team members in positions that the Sentinel's combat algorithms couldn't effectively target. Moreover, Zathrex's seemingly random impacts against the drone's back were targeting specific junction points in its armor, points that a traditional warrior would approach with precise strikes, but which he was hitting through apparently lucky flailing. Lieutenant Johnston had recovered from her stumble, and now ran in an erratic zigzag pattern that made no tactical sense, except that it caused the Sentinel to continuously recalibrate its targeting systems without achieving a lock. "What is this display?" Morvala demanded, her bioluminescence flaring with outrage. "They fight like untrained juveniles." Gilarax's mandibles clicked in what Krosoth recognized as satisfaction. "They fight like neither Vazrathi nor humans expect. The Sentinel's combat algorithms are designed to counter both our traditional disciplines and standard human military tactics. They encounter neither." The demonstration continued for several more minutes, the Alpha team appearing to stumble and blunder their way around the Sentinel's attacks, while somehow, almost accidentally, inflicting damage to key systems. At one point, Kowalski appeared to lose his grip on a railing and fall directly onto the drone's sensor array, his flailing limbs, coincidentally, disrupting its primary optical systems. Finally, after what appeared to be a series of lucky accidents and narrow escapes, the Sentinel stood immobilized in the center of the training deck, its systems compromised not through direct assault, but through what seemed like a sequence of improbable mishaps. Silence fell across the observation deck. The Alpha team, breathing heavily, but otherwise uninjured, assembled in front of the disabled Sentinel and snapped to attention. The humans saluting in their tradition, the Vazrathi performing the formal completion gesture of Imperial combat training. 30% efficiency, Lieutenant Johnston noted respectfully. "We would welcome the opportunity to demonstrate against higher capability." High Counselor. Morvala's compound eyes fixed on the team, her bioluminescence revealing complex, conflicting patterns. Finally, she turned to Gilarax. "You have taught Vazrathi warriors to fight like intoxicated humans," she said, her tone making the statement an accusation. "With respect, High Counselor," Gilarax replied, "I have taught them to fight effectively against opponents who expect Vazrathi warriors. Our traditional methods are not abandoned, but supplemented. In situations where disciplined approach is optimal, they employ it. When unpredictability offers advantage, they adapt. Murphy approached, his usual informality somewhat subdued in Morvala's presence. Think of it like this, High Counselor. Your traditional fighting is like a perfect mathematical equation. Beautiful, precise, and anyone who knows the formula can predict the outcome. We're teaching them to occasionally throw in some random variables that mess up the other guy's calculations. Morvala regarded Murphy with what might have been curiosity beneath her disapproval. You speak of sacred combat disciplines as mathematics. Human. Well, yeah, Murphy shrugged. All fighting styles are patterns. Patterns can be analyzed and countered. Sometimes, you gotta break your own patterns to win. High Counselor, Ambassador Takagi interjected smoothly. The Joint Combat Initiative preserves the strengths of both our military traditions while addressing their shared vulnerabilities. It represents the kind of innovative cooperation our alliance was formed to explore. Morvala remained silent for a long moment, her attention shifting between the disabled Sentinel and the Alpha team. Finally, she addressed Krosoth. Commander, you will provide complete performance data on all joint training initiatives for my review. I will reserve judgment until I have examined the full spectrum of this cooperation. Of course, High Counselor, Krosoth bowed. As the inspection party prepared to continue the tour, Murphy approached Gilarax with a grin. Not bad for a bunch of intoxicated humans. Huh, G-Man. Indeed, the Grand Executor replied, his bioluminescence patterns indicating both satisfaction and concern. Though I suspect the High Counselor's evaluation has only begun. Krosoth, overhearing this exchange, shared Gilarax's concern. Morvala had not risen to her position through diplomatic compromise. If she decided the human alliance threatened Vazrathi military supremacy, her opposition could unravel 6 months of progress in a single report to the Grand Council. The remainder of the tour proceeded with tense formality. Morvala inspected the joint research facilities, where human and Vazrathi scientists collaborated on projects ranging from environmental adaptation technology to cross-species medical treatments. She observed the Commercial Exchange Center, where trade representatives negotiated resource agreements and technology transfers. Throughout, her questions were pointed, her observations keen, and her judgment carefully concealed behind formal diplomatic courtesy. By station evening cycle, Krosoth felt the strain of maintaining perfect protocol in Morvala's presence. As the inspection party reached the diplomatic quarters prepared for the High Counselor, he hoped for a brief respite before the formal reception scheduled for later that night. Commander, Morvala said, as her honor guards inspected the quarters. You will join me for private consultation immediately. Not a request. Krosoth bowed in acknowledgement. Of course. High Counselor. Ambassador Takagi, recognizing the dismissal implicit in Morvala's tone, offered a formal Vazrathi farewell. High Counselor. I look forward to continuing our discussions at the reception. If you require anything during your stay, our staff is at your complete disposal. Morvala acknowledged the ambassador with minimal courtesy before entering her quarters. Krosoth followed, his bioluminescence carefully controlled to reveal nothing of his apprehension. The diplomatic suite had been prepared to Vazrathi specifications, atmospheric composition, gravity adjustment, and lighting all calibrated for optimal comfort. Morvala's honor guards positioned themselves at the perimeter of the main chamber, their presence a reminder of her authority and status. When the entry portal sealed, Morvala turned to Krosoth, her formal diplomatic manner giving way to direct imperial authority. Commander, your reports to the Grand Council have been comprehensive in data, but conspicuously optimistic in assessment. Having observed this station's operations directly, I find myself concerned. Krosoth maintained proper posture. What aspects concern you, High Counselor? The integration exceeds acceptable parameters. Morvala stated flatly. Vazrathi personnel adopting human mannerisms. Imperial combat disciplines diluted by chaos theory. Research protocols contaminated by human inefficiency. Her bioluminescence shifted to the patterns of official censure. You were assigned to oversee cooperation, Commander, not assimilation. The exchange of practices has been bidirectional, Krosoth countered carefully. Humans have adopted numerous Vazrathi protocols in station security, resource management, and hierarchical communication. Superficial adoptions, Morvala dismissed. Meanwhile, Grand Executor Gilarax, once the embodiment of Vazrathi martial perfection, now teaches our warriors to emulate drunken humans. Her mandibles clicked in sharp disapproval. The Grand Council expected an alliance of convenience, Commander. A temporary arrangement to neutralize potential conflict while we assessed human capabilities and weaknesses. Not this. The implication was clear. The alliance had been a strategic maneuver, not a genuine diplomatic initiative, at least from the perspective of certain council members. The alliance has produced tangible benefits, Krosoth said, maintaining formal tone despite his growing concern. Trade revenues have increased by 27%. Military incidents along contested borders have decreased by 63%. The joint research initiatives have yielded technological advancements that neither species could have achieved independently. Statistics, Morvala said dismissively. What of Vazrathi dignity, our cultural identity, our position as the dominant power in this sector? Her compound eyes fixed on Krosoth with unnerving intensity. Some on the council believe you have been compromised, Commander. That prolonged exposure to humans has eroded your commitment to imperial priorities. The accusation, though delivered indirectly, was serious enough to end his career, or worse. Krosoth chose his response with careful precision. My loyalty to the Empire remains absolute. High Counselor, my methods reflect the complexity of the situation. Humans are not like other species we have encountered. They cannot be effectively managed through traditional approaches of intimidation or technological superiority. Because of their unpredictability, Morvala stated, making the word sound like a disease. Because of their adaptability, Krosoth corrected. They transform weakness into strength, chaos into advantage. The coffee incident that began this alliance exemplifies their nature. What should have been a humiliating accident for them became the catalyst for favorable diplomatic terms. Morvala moved to the viewport, looking out at the red dwarf star that had become the symbol of this unprecedented alliance. Her bioluminescence shifted to patterns Krosoth couldn't fully interpret. Complex emotional and political calculations beyond standard communication protocols. The Grand Council is divided on the human question, she finally said. Some see opportunity in continued alliance. Others perceive existential threat in their chaotic expansion. My report will significantly influence the Empire's next actions. She turned back to Krosoth. What would you have me report, Commander? The question was a test. If he advocated too strongly for the alliance, he would confirm suspicions that he had been compromised. If he dismissed its importance, he would undermine his own work and possibly endanger the station itself. I would have you report the truth, High Counselor, Krosoth replied. That the alliance presents both opportunities and challenges. That humans, for all their chaotic nature, have demonstrated good faith in their commitments. That continued engagement, carefully managed, serves imperial interests better than renewed conflict. Morvala studied him for a long moment, her compound eyes revealing nothing of her thoughts. A diplomatic answer, Commander. Perhaps you have found your calling in this role after all. She gestured dismissal. Prepare for the reception. I will expect the station's full command staff in attendance, including the human Murphy. His perspective interests me." Krosoth bowed formally. "It shall be as you command, High Counselor." As he exited Morvala's quarters, Krosoth allowed his bioluminescence to briefly display the concern he had carefully suppressed during their conversation. The High Counselor's interest in Murphy was potentially problematic. The staff sergeant's informal nature and unpredictable responses could easily transform a diplomatic reception into an interstellar incident. He needed to find Murphy immediately and attempt the impossible, preparing chaos incarnate for formal Vazrathi protocol. Commander Krosoth found Staff Sergeant Murphy in one of the station's recreational areas, engaged in teaching a group of Vazrathi junior officers a human game involving small weighted objects being thrown into containers of liquid. "And that's another point for me," Murphy exclaimed, as one of the objects splashed into a container, causing the liquid within to slosh over the rim. "You gotta adjust for the station's artificial gravity, see? It's slightly different from Earth standard." The Vazrathi officers, their bioluminescence patterns, showing a mixture of confusion and engagement, were attempting to replicate Murphy's throwing technique with limited success. Staff Sergeant," Krosoth interrupted, his tone conveying the urgency he felt. "A moment of your time." Murphy turned with his customary grin. "Commander, want to join the beer pong tournament? These guys are quick learners, but they keep overthinking the throw." "I require your presence for preparation regarding tonight's diplomatic reception," Krosoth said formally, aware of the junior officer's attention. "High Counselor Morvala has specifically requested your attendance." Murphy's expression shifted to one of mild surprise. "Me? At a fancy diplomatic thing? You sure that's a good idea, Commander?" "It is a direct request from the High Counselor," Krosoth replied, "which is why immediate preparation is essential." Understanding finally seemed to dawn on Murphy. Retry D continue edit. I'll continue the edited story from where it left off. Understanding finally seemed to dawn on Murphy. He handed his remaining throwing objects to one of the Vazrathi officers. "Keep practicing that wrist flick we talked about. Less calculation, more feel." As they walked through the station corridors toward Murphy's quarters, Krosoth struggled to formulate the most efficient approach to what might be an impossible task. "So," Murphy said casually, "the scary bug lady wants to see me make a fool of myself at a formal party. Any particular reason?" "High Counselor Morvala," Krosoth corrected with emphasis on her proper title, "holds significant influence over the future of the human Vazrathi alliance. Her assessment will determine whether the Grand Council continues to support our joint initiatives or terminates them entirely. And she thinks watching me try to use fancy alien cutlery will help her decide?" Murphy looked skeptical. "Seems like a weird test." "The High Counselor evaluates individuals as well as data," Krosoth explained. "She believes understanding you may provide insight into human nature more broadly." They reached Murphy's quarters, a standard human habitation unit that had been predictably transformed into what the staff sergeant called his bachelor pad. Various Earth artifacts cluttered the space, along with several Vazrathi objects that appeared to have been repurposed in ways their creators never intended. "Okay," Murphy said, dropping onto a seating unit that groaned under his weight. "So, what's the plan? Crash course in how to not offend important Vazrathi officials? Because I gotta tell you, Commander, my track record with your species hasn't exactly been built on following proper protocols." "Indeed," Krosoth acknowledged, remaining standing. "Your victory over Gilarax was achieved through what appeared to be a complete disregard for combat disciplines. However, tonight requires a different approach. The High Counselor will be assessing not just you, but what you represent, human unpredictability, as either asset or liability to the Alliance." Murphy considered this, unusually thoughtful. "So I need to be unpredictable in a predictably non-disastrous way?" "Precisely." Krosoth was surprised by the staff sergeant's perceptiveness. Perhaps there was more calculation behind his chaos than was immediately apparent. The reception will follow formal Vazrathi protocols. I will provide you with the essential ceremonies and responses. The key is to demonstrate respect for our traditions while maintaining your authentic human perspective. My authentic human perspective usually involves saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, Murphy pointed out. That's kind of my specialty. Which is why we must prepare thoroughly, Krosoth insisted. The High Counselor expects you to be chaotic. If you can channel that chaos within acceptable parameters, you may actually help our cause. Murphy stood and moved to a storage unit, extracting what appeared to be a formal human military uniform, still wrapped in protective covering. Ambassador Takagi gave me this a month ago. Said I might need it someday for contingencies. Guess today's the day. Krosoth was momentarily surprised. The ambassador anticipated this situation. Takagi anticipates everything, Murphy said with obvious admiration. She's got contingency plans for her contingency plans. Makes me look spontaneous by comparison, which is saying something. As Murphy prepared his uniform, Krosoth provided a rapid briefing on essential Vazrathi diplomatic protocols, proper greetings for various ranks, acceptable conversation topics, dietary customs, and ceremonial sequences that would be observed during the reception. To his surprise, Murphy absorbed the information with unexpected focus, occasionally asking clarifying questions that revealed genuine interest in avoiding diplomatic disaster. So I should never mention the coffee incident unless the High Counselor brings it up first, he confirmed, adjusting the formal collar of his uniform. Correct. While it led to our current alliance, it remains a point of some embarrassment for certain elements of Vazrathi leadership. Krosoth observed Murphy's transformation with growing optimism. The chaotic human actually appeared capable of appropriate formality when required. And under no circumstances should you use the term G-Man when referring to Grand Executor Gilarax. Got it, Murphy nodded. Use full titles. Watch my hands. All 4 of yours are off limits for touching, and don't make any sudden movements that might trigger combat reflexes. He glanced at a time display. We've got 2 hours before this shindig starts. What else do I need to know? For the next hour, Krosoth continued the briefing, increasingly impressed by Murphy's capacity to adapt when properly motivated. Perhaps this element of human unpredictability, the ability to transform from chaos incarnate to diplomatic participant with minimal preparation, was itself a valuable trait for the Alliance. As they prepared to depart for the reception, Murphy checked his appearance in a reflective surface, his expression uncharacteristically serious. Commander, he said, adjusting his uniform insignia. Level with me. How bad would it be if this alliance fell apart? Krosoth considered the question carefully. For the station, immediate evacuation and potential decommissioning. For the border regions, likely resumption of military incidents. For longer-term relations, he paused, his bioluminescence darkening. The Grand Council contains factions that believe humans should be contained rather than engaged. Failed diplomacy would strengthen their position considerably. Murphy nodded slowly. Right. No pressure then. He straightened his posture in a credible approximation of military discipline. Let's go charm the scary bug lady. The diplomatic reception was held in the station's grand observation gallery, a spectacular space with transparent viewport walls, offering panoramic views of Proxima Centauri and its planetary system. The environmental systems had been calibrated to a careful compromise between human and Vazrathi preferences, creating conditions tolerable, if not optimal, for both species. Decorative elements reflected both cultures. Vazrathi luminescent art installations, complemented by human floral arrangements engineered to survive in the modified atmosphere. The catering stations offered segregated cuisine, designed for the different biochemistries. Though some innovative chefs had created several cross-species compatible appetizers that had become popular among the more adventurous station personnel. Crosoth and Murphy arrived to find the reception already underway. Ambassador Takagi was engaged in conversation with several Vazrathi officials. Her formal diplomatic attire incorporating subtle elements of Vazrathi design aesthetics. Grand Executor Gilarax stood with the Alpha team members, their collective presence drawing respectful attention from both human and Vazrathi attendees. High Counselor Morvala occupied the central position in the gallery, her honor guards maintaining formal distance as various dignitaries approached to pay respects according to strict protocol sequence. "Remember," Crosoth said quietly as they entered, "you will be presented after the senior staff but before the research directors. Maintain formal posture, perform the greeting as practiced, and limit your initial response to the approved phrases we discussed." "Got it," Murphy replied, his usual levity subdued by the formality of the occasion. "Follow the script until told otherwise." The presentation sequence proceeded with precise Vazrathi efficiency. Ambassador Takagi performed her role flawlessly, her mastery of Vazrathi diplomatic protocol drawing subtle approval patterns in Morvala's bioluminescence. The station's department heads followed, each interaction meticulously correct, if somewhat stiff. Then it was Murphy's turn. Crosoth watched with carefully controlled apprehension as the staff sergeant approached the High Counselor. This single interaction could influence Morvala's perception of the entire human species and, by extension, the future of the Alliance itself. Murphy halted at the precise diplomatic distance, his posture military straight. He performed the formal Vazrathi greeting with surprising accuracy, including a respectful mandible click approximation that, while obviously human in origin, demonstrated genuine effort to honor Vazrathi custom. "High Counselor Morvala," Murphy said, his tone uncharacteristically formal. "Staff Sergeant Jack Murphy, Human Combat Integration Specialist, at your service. I am honored by your presence and the opportunity to demonstrate the value of our alliance." Morvala's compound eyes fixed on Murphy with unsettling intensity. Her bioluminescence patterns shifted in what Crosoth recognized as calculating assessment. "Staff Sergeant Murphy," she responded, her harmonics perfectly modulated for diplomatic address. "Your reputation precedes you, the human who defeated our greatest warrior through unorthodox means." Murphy maintained his formal stance. "With respect, High Counselor, I would characterize it as a learning opportunity for both our species, rather than a defeat or victory. Grand Executor Gilarax has taught me more about true combat discipline than all my previous military training combined." The response was diplomatic, respectful, and completely unlike Murphy's usual communication style. Crosoth allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. Perhaps the staff sergeant was capable of navigating this interaction successfully after all. "An interesting perspective," Morvala replied. "Tell me, Staff Sergeant, do you believe your chaotic approach to combat truly offers advantages over our perfected disciplines, developed over thousands of years of imperial expansion?" The question was a trap, designed to force either an admission of inferiority or an insulting claim of superiority. Crosoth had warned Murphy about such rhetorical maneuvers, providing carefully balanced responses that acknowledged Vazrathi tradition while highlighting complementary human approaches. Murphy was silent for a moment, and Crosoth could almost see the practiced responses they had rehearsed scrolling through the human's mind. Then, something shifted in Murphy's expression, a flicker of his usual irreverent self breaking through the formal facade. "Actually, High Counselor," Murphy said, abandoning the script entirely, "I think we both got it wrong." The gallery seemed to collectively hold its breath. Crosoth's bioluminescence involuntarily flashed warning patterns, though he maintained his composed exterior. This was precisely the kind of unscripted moment he had hoped to avoid. "Explain," Morvala commanded, her tone betraying genuine curiosity beneath the formal demand. "Your warriors spend their lives mastering perfect patterns. My approach was total chaos. But the real sweet spot," Murphy gestured to where the Alpha team stood. "It's right in the middle. Disciplined chaos. Calculated unpredictability. Your warriors are learning to be unpredictable on purpose, not by accident like me. And our Marines are learning the precision that makes your fighting style so effective." He grinned suddenly, his formal demeanor cracking further. "It's like when you add a little bit of salt to sweet food. Separately, they're good. Together, they're better." Morvala's bioluminescence displayed patterns Krosoth couldn't fully interpret. Complex emotional and intellectual calculations beyond standard diplomatic ranges. "You compare military doctrine to food seasoning, Staff Sergeant Murphy?" "Well, yeah," Murphy shrugged, his formal posture relaxing into his more natural stance. "Both are about balance. Too much of anything ruins the result. The perfect combination depends on the situation." He glanced toward Gilarax. "That's what the Grand Executor has been teaching us. When to be precise, when to be unpredictable, and how to switch between them at exactly the right moment." Krosoth prepared himself for Morvala's censure. Murphy had abandoned protocol, used casual metaphors to describe sacred combat traditions, and nearly slipped into using his inappropriate nickname for Gilarax. The diplomatic disaster he had feared was unfolding before him. Yet, to his astonishment, Morvala's bioluminescence shifted to patterns indicating thoughtful consideration rather than offense. "An interesting analogy," the High Counselor said. "Primitive, yet not without insight." She gestured to one of the attendants. "You will join me for continuation of this discussion, Staff Sergeant Murphy. I find your perspective educational." As Murphy was escorted to Morvala's private conversation area, he glanced back at Krosoth with a mixture of surprise and triumph, offering a subtle thumbs-up gesture hidden from the High Counselor's view. Ambassador Takagi appeared at Krosoth's side, her expression carefully neutral, though her eyes betrayed relief. "It appears Staff Sergeant Murphy has made an impression on the High Counselor. An unpredictable one," Krosoth acknowledged. "Though perhaps that is precisely why it succeeded. Morvala expected either formal deference or human chaos. Murphy provided neither, but something between the two. The essence of our alliance," Takagi observed. "Neither species compromising their nature, but each learning from the other's strengths." She accepted a beverage from a passing service drone. "The question remains whether Morvala will see it as strength or contamination." Across the gallery, Murphy was engaged in animated conversation with the High Counselor, his hands occasionally moving in expressive gestures that would have been considered inappropriate in formal Vazrathi communication. Yet Morvala appeared to be listening with genuine attention, her bioluminescence displaying patterns of engagement rather than the dismissal Krosoth had anticipated. The reception continued for several hours, following the precise ceremonial sequence dictated by Vazrathi diplomatic tradition. Throughout, Murphy remained in conversation with Morvala, occasionally joined by Gilarax or other senior officials, but maintaining what appeared to be a surprisingly productive dialogue with the High Counselor. As the event drew to its formal conclusion, Krosoth found himself approached by Morvala's senior aide. "Commander," the aide said with formal deference, "the High Counselor requests your presence in her diplomatic suite at first station cycle tomorrow. She wishes to discuss her preliminary findings before continuing the inspection tour." "Of course," Krosoth bowed in acknowledgement. "I shall attend her at the designated time." As the reception dispersed, Murphy made his way back to Krosoth and Ambassador Takagi, his formal uniform now slightly disheveled after hours of animated conversation. "So," he said with obvious satisfaction, "I think that went pretty well, considering I was expecting to get thrown out an airlock for saying something wrong." "What exactly did you discuss with the High Counselor for 3 hours?" Takagi asked, her diplomatic composure not quite hiding her curiosity. "Everything," Murphy grinned. "Combat theory, human history, Vazrathi expansion strategies, cultural exchange programs. She was particularly interested in how humans deal with failure. Apparently, you guys don't handle it well. No offense, Commander." "None taken," Krosoth replied, genuinely curious now. "Vazrathi military doctrine treats failure as unacceptable. How did the High Counselor respond to the human perspective?" "She thought our approach was inefficient at first. All that learning from mistakes and adapting," Murphy explained. "But then, I told her about Earth's military history. How we've often lost battles but won wars by adapting faster than our enemies expected. She seemed to get the concept, even if she didn't fully approve." "The High Counselor has requested my presence tomorrow morning," Krosoth informed them, presumably to discuss her assessment of the station and the Alliance more broadly. Murphy's expression turned uncharacteristically serious. "For what it's worth, Commander, I think she's genuinely curious, not just looking for evidence to shut us down. She asked really specific questions about our joint combat training, not dismissive ones, but like she was trying to understand the underlying principles." "A promising sign," Takagi acknowledged. "Though the High Counselor is known for her thoroughness, one conversation, however productive, will not override her fundamental commitment to Vazrathi traditions." "Maybe not," Murphy agreed. "But she did say one thing that stuck with me. After I explained how humans turn disasters into opportunities, she said that adaptability has evolutionary advantages, even if it lacks aesthetic appeal. Coming from her, I think that's practically a ringing endorsement." Krosoth's bioluminescence flickered in thoughtful patterns. "Perhaps we shall see what her official assessment reveals tomorrow." As they parted ways for the night cycle, Krosoth found himself contemplating the paradox at the heart of the human-Vazrathi alliance. The very quality that made humans so difficult to understand, their chaotic, adaptive nature, might prove to be what saved the alliance itself. If Morvala could be made to see unpredictability as strength rather than weakness, perhaps the Grand Council could be similarly persuaded. The first station cycle arrived with the artificial precision that governed life aboard Joint Harmony. Krosoth prepared himself for the meeting with Morvala with meticulous attention to protocol, his formal diplomatic armor polished to perfection, his bioluminescence patterns calibrated to convey respectful attention without subservience. The High Counselor's diplomatic suite was arranged for formal business, her honor guards positioned at strategic points rather than the perimeter, a subtle indication that this meeting was official rather than consultative. Morvala herself sat at a raised position behind a traditional council interface, data streams flowing across its luminescent surface. "Commander Krosoth," she acknowledged his entry, without looking up from the data. "You will be interested to know that I have completed my preliminary assessment of this station and its operations." Krosoth performed the formal salute, appropriate to her rank. "I await your evaluation, High Counselor." Morvala's compound eyes fixed on him with clinical precision. "My findings are complex. This alliance has produced tangible benefits that cannot be dismissed. Trade metrics exceed projections by 23%. Security incidents have decreased significantly. The joint research initiatives have yielded technological advancements with military applications beneficial to the Empire." She paused, her bioluminescence shifting to more reserved patterns. "However, I have also observed concerning levels of cultural integration, Vazrathi personnel adopting human mannerisms, Imperial protocols being modified to accommodate human inefficiency. Combat disciplines diluted by chaos theory. Krosoth maintained neutral patterns, waiting for her conclusion rather than defending prematurely. The Staff Sergeant Murphy, Morvala continued, represents both the potential and the risk of this alliance. His chaotic nature achieved what should have been impossible, defeating our greatest warrior. Yet, that same unpredictability makes humans fundamentally unreliable allies by traditional Vazrathi standards. She rose from her position, moving to the viewport that overlooked the station's main promenade. Below, humans and Vazrathi moved about their duties, the initial awkwardness of their interaction having evolved into efficient cooperation. The Grand Council must decide whether the benefits of this alliance outweigh the cultural contamination it inevitably produces, Morvala said. My report will present both aspects with equal emphasis, allowing the Council to make an informed decision. Krosoth recognized the diplomatic phrasing for what it was, neither endorsement nor condemnation, but a calculated neutrality that protected Morvala's political position regardless of the Council's eventual decision. May I inquire as to your personal assessment, High Counselor? He asked carefully. Beyond the official report, Morvala turned from the viewport, her bioluminescence displaying the formal patterns of official communication. My personal assessment is irrelevant to Imperial policy. Commander, I serve the Grand Council's collective wisdom, not my individual judgment. A political answer, but not unexpected. Krosoth bowed in acknowledgement. Of course, High Counselor. How may I assist with the remainder of your inspection? My inspection is concluded, Morvala announced, surprising him. I have gathered sufficient data for my report. The Grand Council will receive my findings within 3 days, and you will be informed of their decision shortly thereafter. The abrupt termination of what had been scheduled as a 5-day inspection suggested either that Morvala had seen enough to form her conclusions, or that she wished to distance herself from the station before submitting her report. Neither possibility offered clear insight into what that report might contain. I understand, High Counselor, Krosoth said formally. We stand ready to implement whatever directives the Grand Council provides. Indeed, Morvala's mandibles clicked once, a sound that could indicate either satisfaction or dismissal. There is one additional matter, Commander. The Grand Executor has submitted a formal request to establish a permanent Joint Combat Academy using the methodologies developed on this station. This request was filed directly to my office, rather than through standard military channels. Krosoth's bioluminescence flickered involuntarily in surprise. Gilarax had not informed him of this initiative. I was unaware of this request, High Counselor. Evidently, Morvala's tone carried a hint of what might have been amusement. The Grand Executor can be impulsive when convinced of a tactical advantage. This request will be included in my report for Council consideration. Gilarax requesting permanent institutionalization of the Joint Combat Program represented a significant endorsement of the Human-Vazrathi partnership, one that carried substantial weight given his military reputation and influence. That he had submitted this request directly to Morvala, bypassing traditional channels, suggested both urgency and political calculation. Is there anything else I should be aware of, High Counselor? Krosoth asked, uncertain whether to hope for more revelations or fewer. Nothing requiring immediate attention, Morvala replied. My shuttle will depart in 3 hours. A formal farewell ceremony will not be necessary. Another departure from protocol, and another ambiguous signal about Morvala's ultimate assessment. By waiving the farewell ceremony, she either indicated displeasure with the station or a desire to avoid establishing ceremonial connections before the Council's decision. As you wish, High Counselor, safe journey to you. Krosoth exited the diplomatic suite with his thoughts in careful order, his bioluminescence patterns revealing nothing of his concern or speculation. Until the Grand Council's decision arrived, the alliance would continue as established, but preparations for either outcome would need to begin immediately. News of Morvala's early departure spread quickly through the station's communication networks. Ambassador Takagi convened an emergency meeting of the senior diplomatic staff, while Gilarax assembled the Joint Combat Initiative leadership to brief them on his unexpected request to establish a permanent academy. Murphy found Krosoth in the station's strategic planning center, reviewing contingency protocols for various council decision scenarios. "So," the staff sergeant said without preamble, "is this good news or bad news? The scary bug lady leaving early?" Krosoth had long since given up correcting Murphy's informal references to high-ranking Vazrathi officials when they weren't present. "It is inconclusive news, Staff Sergeant. The High Counselor has gathered sufficient data for her report, but gives no indication of its recommendations." "But she didn't immediately shut us down," Murphy pointed out. "That's something, right?" "Indeed," Krosoth acknowledged. "However, the Grand Council may reach its own conclusions regardless of Morvala's specific recommendations. The alliance represents a significant departure from traditional imperial expansion policies." Murphy hopped onto a console edge, ignoring the formal seating arrangements of the planning center. "G-Man thinks it's going to work out. Says his academy request is a strategic commitment to integrated combat doctrine, or something fancy like that." "The Grand Executor's initiative is significant," Krosoth agreed, "though perhaps premature given the Council's pending decision." "Maybe that's the point," Murphy suggested. "Get the idea out there before anyone can shut it down. Create momentum." He grinned suddenly. "Actually, sounds like something I would do. G-Man's learning human thinking after all." The observation was more perceptive than Murphy likely realized. Gilarax's direct approach to Morvala, bypassing traditional military hierarchies, did indeed reflect the kind of adaptive, opportunity-seizing behavior that characterized human tactical thinking. The greatest Vazrathi warrior was, in his own way, becoming more unpredictable. "Perhaps you are correct," Krosoth said. "In any case, we must prepare for all potential outcomes of the Council's decision." "And if they decide to shut us down?" Murphy asked, his usual levity fading. "What happens then?" "Officially, an orderly transition to separate operations, with diplomatic relations maintained at a more traditional distance," Krosoth explained. "Unofficially, complications could arise. Some Council factions view humans as a long-term threat to Vazrathi dominance in this sector." Murphy nodded slowly. "Good thing we've been practicing how to deal with the unexpected." Then, before Krosoth could respond, the station's priority alert system activated. A resonant tone echoed through the planning center as display surfaces shifted to emergency protocols. "Unidentified vessels detected at system boundary," the automated system announced in both Vazrathi and human languages. "Multiple signatures. Approach vector indicates deliberate course toward station. Authentication protocols failed. Defensive alert status activated." Krosoth moved immediately to the central command interface, Murphy following close behind. The tactical display materialized above the console, showing Proxima Centauri system's current configuration with approaching vessel markers highlighted in warning colors. "How many ships?" Murphy asked, his demeanor shifting instantly from casual to focused military professionalism. 17 distinct signatures, Krosoth reported, analyzing the incoming data. "Configuration unknown, not Vazrathi or human design." He activated the station-wide communication system. "All personnel to defensive stations. This is not a drill. Ambassador Takagi and Grand Executor Gilarax to Strategic Command immediately." As the station transformed from diplomatic outpost to defensive installation, alarm klaxons sounding throughout its interconnected modules. Krosoth felt a strange calm descend upon him. The chaotic unpredictability that had defined the human alliance now faced an external threat, and he found himself curious how their combined response would unfold. Perhaps, he reflected, as Murphy began coordinating with human security teams through his communication device. This unexpected crisis would provide the ultimate test of whether chaos and order could truly become more effective together than either could achieve alone. And somewhere in the vastness of space beyond Proxima Centauri, 17 unknown vessels continued their approach, their intentions as mysterious as their origins, a new variable in the equation of human-Vazrathi relations that neither species had anticipated.